right, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm here with Eric, our IT guy from the Sudo Show. And Eric, good to have you.
Hey, glad to be here.
Everyone that has been on here, these are tailored video game tastes. The last few, I kind of have an inclination of like them personally. Like we've interacted, but not as much as I have with like Jill or Wendy,
Right.
Obviously.
Regular creator meetings. That's about it.
Yeah. So, or trolling Michael.
Yeah, that's. Can we list that as a hobby?
I don't know.
Is that a hobby or a profession?
It's a profession if I'm trolling Ryan, and I'll give you the profession of trolling Michael.
Perfect.
For those that don't know, the show is about tailored video game experiences, whether or not we try to get outside of our little bubbles that we normally wouldn't do for games. What is generically your forms of entertainment? You know, like music, movies, you know, genres, I guess, for games too.
So way back before Rona, back in the early days, I loved going to live concerts. That hasn't been a thing, obviously, for the last year or so, but it has actually freed up my time. I've read more books in the past year and a half than I have in a long time. Some of them are technology related. Others are. I've been on a high fantasy kick lately, believe it or not. But one of my passions has always been gaming. I dived. That's great English. As you can tell, I speak for a living, and a lot of the time it's video games. But I've also played different board games, and last 2 years I've become a huge D&D nerd. I'm actually a dungeon master every other week on Sundays, and I've really fallen in love with D&D and more in love with RPGs. So when it comes to video games, that's been directly reflected, because for the longest time it was Halo, it was Modern Warfare, and then one of my biggest loves has always been StarCraft 2. StarCraft was probably the first PC game I ever played. But what you and I got talking about kind of in the pre-show and leading up to our recording was that lately I've gotten more into RPGs. If it's not turn-based strategy games like Civilization, or even real-time like Stellaris has been one of my favorites lately. But probably my big addiction right now, and what I find myself playing, even if I just have 10 minutes, is Elder Scrolls Online. So that RPG fantasy, I love the fact that it's such an open game. I especially love the fact that I can play it under Linux without too much trouble. The most recent update aside, but I've my over the last couple of years, and D&D definitely has a lot of influence on that. But my interest has shifted away from just straight first person shooters more into RPGs.
So, seeing how you're the D&D nerd currently, what edition?
I've only actually played D&D 5e, but I've looked at some of the other editions, and I think I came into D&D at the right time, just because some of the older versions were so mechanic heavy, and while I like how a lot of that's been streamlined, so I can get a little bit of both. I can get into the role play, but I still do like going and blowing stuff up. You know, magic missile, just everything.
Fireball, everything.
In fact, my better half, we tease her, because in our group we call her Direwolf, because we went through one of my buddies was DMing, and we went through this really horrendous battle. Our healer was out of spell slots. Most of us were at low health, and we'd won. We managed to get our loot. We were literally walking home, and on a hill far from our party was a direwolf, and my wife decided that that could be hostile. Fireball, and all of us went, "No, what are you?" And sure enough, she rolled the dice, and so that became canon, and we all got mauled. nearly to death by a pack of direwolves. So for the last year and a half, that's been her nickname when it comes to our D&D group.
So we're probably going to get into some D&D nerd talk because I do love me some D&D. I started back in like the late 90s, mid 90s with it. So I remember I like the streamlinedness of 5, but I love the range of different subclasses and details and all that stuff from like 2nd edition. Because of like you have like your kits and you're like much more, they're more defined, right. But like you could have different, like you'd have your class and then you'd have like a sub kit of like in that class. Like if you were a ranger, you would have like the stalker kit for it. And it added a little bit of flavor and diversity to the generic, you're a ranger kind of deal.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think Wizards of the Coast has started to kind of correct that a little bit as D&D 5 has expanded and as some of the new modules come out. They've included additional subclasses, and that kind of helps. And then there's been blogs and wikis everywhere about how to build a D&D 5 character towards a subclass that maybe doesn't exist. So if all you want to do is fire, then I mean, who doesn't? Yeah, exactly. So there's like unofficial subclasses, the ideas on how to build your character, what skills to get, what stats to really pay attention to, things like that. So I think I definitely think it was a good thing moving to a less mechanic intensive. And now that they've taken that step back, and now that they've got a lot of momentum in the community again, it's something that's really they've kind of started to put things back in.
Yeah, which is really cool. And FYI, for those that ever want to mess with the DM at all, just become a chronomancer. This episode of GameSphere is brought to you by DigitalOcean and their app platform. DigitalOcean's app platform service is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. Use a simple, intuitive, visually rich experience to rapidly build and deploy, manage, and scale apps. Support for Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, static sites, Docker, and container images. It's highly scalable, zero infrastructure management. What does that mean? Well, you simply point to your GitHub or GitLab repositories and let App Platform do all the heavy lifting. It handles the infrastructure, app runtimes, dependencies so that you can push code to production in just a few clicks. It gives you secure apps so they create, manage, renew your SSL certifications, and also protect your apps from DDoS attacks. Run code with little to no customization. App Platform uses open cloud-native standards and automatically analyzes your code, creates containers, and runs them on Kubernetes clusters. As a listener of GameSphere podcast and a member of the DLN community, you can get started for free, actually better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you a $100 credit when you go to do.co/DLN. Again, go to do.co/DLN to get started with your $100 free credit on DigitalOcean's new app platform. We want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of GameSphere. Speaking of RPG elements and your love of first-person shooter stuff, though, I could have made the recommendation of something along the lines of like a Mass Effect or any of those kind of games, but this is kind of going outside that kind of sphere of genericness, unfortunately, and I don't want to talk about crappy endings to a game. So I decided to throw a game at you that it had 2 really great movies, and anything after those 2 movies has been terrible.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you can screw up that much lore over that many years with that many different people involved.
All I'm going to say is when the TV show was bad, I actually enjoyed the TV show.
It started out good, but I felt like it fell off very quickly.
After the first season, and then you have the ending, and that was bad. So for those that are wondering,
we won't talk about that.
No, well, thank you, Fox. So for those that are wondering what game we're talking about, this game is called Terminator Resistance. If you couldn't figure it out by the title, or something that is done by Teon, who they don't have the best track record when it comes to developing video games. They have a lot of on-the-rail shooters. They somehow managed to screw up a Rambo game, and make it dumb generic on the road shooter, but with a bow and arrow. When I made this recommendation, my expectations were pretty low. Not gonna lie. Between the films and the previous developer history, I did not have high expectations. But my expectations aside, what were your initial thoughts when I made this recommendation?
So Terminator, granted, we talked a lot about D&D and high fantasy and that kind of thing, but my first real love was science fiction. I grew up on Star Trek, on Star Wars, on a lot of different science fiction. It was all space based, and that was the thing until well through college. Being a big sci-fi nerd, Terminator was always something I was excited about, especially when I got into computers. Now it's like, okay, action flicks and sci-fi and using technology to go back through time, all these kind of things. So I've always had a special place for Terminator, and they keep finding a way to crush my spirits every time they release something new. So I was, based on when this was set, I was a little worried because the Salvation movie was interesting, but
Want to call it that?
It's the nicest word I could think of.
We got a lot of meme-worthy stuff from Christian Bale from that. Thank you.
Right. But I was excited because Terminator is something I was excited about, and I do still like my action shooters, even though I don't play them nearly as much, mostly because as a dad and as somebody who works full-time and hosts a podcast, usually by the time, if I actually get to put my AMD graphics card to use actually playing a video game, usually I'm pretty tired. So something low speed, something that doesn't involve a lot of focus, is usually what I go towards. So when I looked into this game, when I first installed it, I was pretty excited. Let's throw back to my first person shooter days. Plus, we talked about the whole RPG focus. So there's a lot of skill trees. There's actually a lot of ways to customize your build, and get into crafting, so you can make your own ammunition as you fairly early in the game, actually.
Well, as you can see, I'm actually, so people are going to wonder where I'm actually at. This is a fresh start that I'm maybe 10 minutes into the game. You play the character of Rivers, and Jacob Rivers. If you've played Mass Effect, if you've played probably I would say it falls more in line with Fallout as far as like the way it's presented.
Yeah, definitely had a Fallout feel to it.
Though the choices actually do matter. So the one thing I do like is, like, right now I'm just looking down the barrel of the gun. These guys really did nail the lighting effects, because a lot of the things in Terminator specifically is a lot of the lighting. Mm-hmm. That bluish hue that a lot of the feature scenes from a lot of the movies and stuff have. And I'll give these guys credit for a lot of what I've played for further down the line and saw with this. Is there's actually people who really understand and like this franchise.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that I noticed very early on. I mean, even before you're through the tutorial mission, was the atmosphere. It was very eerie. It was very the atmosphere, the scenes, the ambient noise, everything was very much like those future-based scenes that you saw even as early as the first couple of Terminator movies.
You're in Pasadena, California, and in the game, your entire team has been wiped out, and you meet the survivors of this civilian portion of that have been wiped out, or heading to an evac zone. Jennifer and her brother Patrick, just like every other, if you ever watched a kaiju movie, Kenny's. They're annoying. Kid actors tend to be annoying. Kids in video games tend to be annoying. What did you think of like the graphic style though? Because like there's a lot of like animation and like these cutscenes that are coming up. This is not a high demanding video game as far as like what does it require in the CPU, GPU stuff. I think the graphics work though.
Mm-hmm. Well, For me, and this is nothing against the game itself. This is just personal preference. So before all the negative comments come, scrolling through the video, this is just my thought. This is my preference. I felt like for the seriousness of the atmosphere, I felt like there's no limit to the amount of language that's involved in the game, which was kind of another negative I felt. But just the seriousness of the atmosphere, I didn't feel like that worked with the graphics that they used. It was too animated. Actually, I kind of felt like it would have worked better if it was something more like a Modern Warfare type of graphics. But like I said, that's personal preference. I would have a little bit more realistic graphics. I think would have matched the sound effects, the music tracks, just this ominous feeling of you could turn the corner and there'd be a Terminator right in front of you.
My biggest thing is when it comes to specifically like the graphics and stuff is the character animation kind of stuff and whatnot. It doesn't feel as fluid as say you would normally get in a higher budgeted game. So this is not a first person game like I can't even say like the Fallout games are like high budget as far as like their animation stuff. But the character modeling and like their movement and stuff just feels stiff. I think is the best way I can describe it.
Great explanation.
You mentioned the audio. I do want to mention that yes, they actually do have the classic theme on the intro screen.
Yep. Yeah. As soon as the game loaded, I was taken back. It was great to hear the classic theme and not something custom written or taken from one of the other movies. It was the classic Terminator soundtrack, and it felt good. And I even sent a message to Matt the first time I loaded it up. I took a screenshot because the title screen starts with those red glowing eyes from a metal Terminator, and it's just between that and the soundtrack, you're just immediately like, okay, I know exactly what is coming. It just kind of helped get you in the mood. And in fact, by the time you get to the camp, I actually had because I've got a 2.1 sound system on my desk here. But by the time I got that far into the game, I actually pulled out my in-ear headphones just to really get that full feel. I wanted to blot out everything else around me. I really just wanted to be brought into the game. And I'm not going to lie, there was one point something jumped out at me, and I'm pretty sure I jumped.
It's open world, but it's more hub open world. So there's like predefined corridors and kind of ways to go to stuff. It opens up a little bit, but really it's pretty structurally straightforward on how to do stuff. It's you can sneak up on enemies and that kind of stuff, and you can sneak around and try to get better vantage points and stuff. But overall, it's pretty. If example, like there's a spider bot right here, or it's like, what do? Do you shoot it? Do you Oblivion or any of those type of Bethesda games? If you hit E and you hit E again, you take everything. This game is about hoarding, kind of like other games in similar structure, but this is very much done in a FPS way that I don't think a lot of other games have done, because I've played the Fallout games, and for me, they're very not good first-person shooters.
Well, and I kind of had a similar reaction, and I'm glad you mentioned Fallout, because I actually had two different reactions to the game. The first time I played through maybe about an hour or so, and it's like, this is okay. This is going to be hard to then come on the show and talk about. But I gave it a couple of days. I set it aside. I was on this Stellaris kick, and it's like, okay, I'm going to feed that, and then I'll come back. And so just the other day, I loaded it back up. I just said, all right, I'm going to sit down. I want to try and get through the next couple of chapters, and let's see what happens. And when I sat down the second time, Fallout really came to mind, collecting all the resources, doing some crafting, just the way the world was laid out. It's like, okay, so this is not like a real action RPG. This is much more in the style of Fallout. So I have to conserve resources. I have to be much more cautious because the enemies are even on normal difficulty. The enemies are fairly strong. I mean, you eventually can get to the point where you can just 2 or 3 shot a spider bot, but once I changed my approach of this is not like Halo where you'd never really run out of ammo. You've got to conserve. You've got to be smart about how you pick your engagements. When I went in with a little bit more caution, and really focused on like developing my skill lines of, okay, every time I walk out there, I get mowed down. So let's get health. Okay, that makes it so that I can stand in a fight a little bit longer. Or what if I start avoiding fights? So I upgraded my stealth, and then I focused on my weapons. And it's like, okay, now this is starting to make sense because I can now, if I pick my engagements, and throwing a pipe grenade at one of the heavy armored turrets is great fun watching it explode. But when I came at it from a different perspective, just getting a better idea of how the game is meant to be played really changed my opinion of the game.
Because I remember playing like the T2 Judgment Day arcade game, right, with the actual firearm and stuff on the cabinet.
Oh, I love those.
And yeah, freaking quarter drainers those were.
Yeah, no joke.
But that's the one thing I remember is that a lot of these games are developed in a way that it's meant for more instant gratifications or run and gun and that kind of stuff. Like even, and I'm not the biggest fan of certain genres of games like Call of Duty, but that is the mindset in a lot of the Call of Duty games, get good kind of deal. And that's not what this is. This is very strategic. It's more plotting. It's not one of those games where I can go and just kind of play everything and just be like, okay, whatever, and not completely disengage my brain. Right. This is one of those, I literally have to actually start thinking about the skills and all the stuff that you're going to worry about. So like right now, most people are probably wondering where I'm at. I'm looking for survivors, i.e. right here. So that's the biggest thing I've found for me personally is like, it's just finding the right mindset. Sometimes if a game doesn't grab you in the first hour or two, it's really tough to actually get enjoyable into it. Yep. And like you, for me, like the first hour of this, it was like, it's kind of like one of those, just like, I'm either going to die a lot or this is terribly built, kind of game. Yeah. And once I kind of took the Fallout vibe to it instead, having played, because I love New Vegas, like out of all the Fallout games, like New Vegas is easily my favorite. This allows taking that mindset to it ends up changing how you view the game. Yep. And I think that is something, unfortunately, sometimes because we have how our preconceived notions of games are, that we don't always look at them differently. Like, okay, this is not the way it's meant to be played, so why are we attempting to make it be played this way?
Yeah, I mean, you really had to get over that preconceived notion, because I'm sure like a lot of folks would look at Terminator, and especially, I mean, I talked about the title screen, how I just was grabbed by the title screen already. I mean, if you think about it, even the first couple of Terminator movies, there was not a lot of complex storytelling. There was this huge world that they kind of told you about as the first two movies went along, but there was not a deep plot. I mean, none of the characters had any dark, surprising twists or anything. So I kind of expected that just because the world that this game was set in, I kind of expected something similar. But I mean, granted, none of the characters I've met so far are that in depth, but I kind of expected more of a run and gun. And I'm just waiting for Arnold to show up and start shooting things. But that's not really what you get. So it really did take that shift in mindset to realize that this isn't just a run and gun, that I have to be smart about this. And when I came at it that second time, it really was more enjoyable, and I actually got out of this initial this initial map fairly quickly. So that helps.
Yeah, definitely does. Like I said, the biggest thing is I think just getting over your like preconceived takes on how to approach it, because unfortunately, like you said, we do tend to approach it kind of based on our notions of how we've played other things in the past. And I'm probably gonna die. Here's yeah. So for unlike Ryan, I make no qualms about this. I suck at first-person shooters.
I wish I were still good at first-person shooters, but
yeah,
back when I could play for 4 or 5 hours every Friday night and have a drink with my buddies and play until 2 a.m, I could keep up. But nowadays, when you get sniped and the person on the other team who's laughing at you is like 8 years old, it's like, yeah, I need to find either just play single player only from here on out, or pick a different genre of game.
Yeah. So like, there's certain elements here you can tell, like, because you got the cutscene playing right now, and it's like the dark, grungy look works because it's Terminator, but like you can tell like some of the van textures and stuff are just like blurry, and that was kind of one of the other things I noticed about that. Was it just really, really, I don't want to say short-sighted in it, but it really doesn't hurt it, but it doesn't help it,
right?
Because like right now, some of the characters have that really stiff, like dead eye character facial that you see. Jacob,
maybe they all just got too much Botox.
Well, I mean, they are in Pasadena, so close enough to Hollywood.
There you go.
Jacob's probably the only one that has more natural kind of facial movement that I've seen so far. What was the thing that you liked the best about this game, though, from what you've played so far?
Once I kind of got a feel for how the mechanics worked and how the game expected you to progress, I did like I did like some of the situational engagements. Like after this coming cutscene, you get sent out and you pick up 2 or 3 side quests, and then your main mission, and like you were talking about, you end up in a space that's a little bit more open. It's a little bit less structured, so you can kind of explore a little bit. And when you get close enough, it'll pop up on your HUD that you're close to an objective, and then there's this detector mode or investigator mode, something along those lines, that it's got X-ray vision, among other things, so you can kind of scope out the area you're getting ready to run into. Because the first time I did that, I ran out into what used to be a parking lot and got mowed down by two flying scouts and a heavy turret, and just like, oh well, that was dumb. And so the second time, kind of surveyed it, kind of scoped it out. You get a feel for the patrol patterns for some of the different units. So you wait, okay, there went the 2 flying things. Okay, now the heavy turret's looking the other way. Now I can move forward and get to the objective and avoid that engagement altogether, instead of, oh, I ran out of ammunition about halfway through that engagement and then quickly died.
Very true. Yeah, that's probably something we should have mentioned, is it's essentially detective vision from the Batman Arkham games mixed with night vision from probably the Modern Warfare games.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best indication of what it will do for you, because you can see through walls, but it's not like Superman see through walls. It's one of those like outline, kind of vague. You don't know really what's in front of you other than it's a wall.
Yeah, that definitely helps. So I think one of my favorite, going at it the second time, one of my favorite things was having to be tactical about how to approach. It's like the early Rainbow Six games where you die very, very quickly. if you pick the wrong engagement, or if you come at it from the wrong direction. But I did get to the point where it's like, okay, this is cool, and I actually avoided more engagements than I actually chose to actually fight. There's a couple of times where you don't have a choice, and it's more just trying to pick the timing of your engagement correctly so you don't get swarmed. So instead, you can pick off a target, you can throw a pipe grenade out into its path, and just being very tactical about how you approach it became a real interesting challenge. It was almost like a bunch of mini puzzles set side by side that you had to solve each one.
So the one thing that I liked about this is I think it, while graphically it doesn't meet, say, what most people expect from like it's Terminator, so it's going to be a high budget no, it's a movie licensed game. Like, right. keep anybody from the early 2000s or before that should know, keep your expectations low on that stuff. They usually tend to be crap. But the thing I like about this is exactly what you were talking about, though. You don't engage as much as you think you would, because that is the whole point of essentially the Terminator mythos, though. You pick your spots.
Right.
You don't, oh, hey, there's 3 HK drones in the sky. You don't run and fight them. You weave it in and out and pick your spots to where you're going to engage that and be tactical about it. And that's something I think a lot of reviewers and stuff that actually reviewed this game kind of missed out on that boat, because if you're the resistance, you're fighting machines who basically want to wipe you out, human race.
And who basically have unlimited resources. And
you are a finite resource. You, the person. Because, 3 billion dead in 1997. Thank you for the 15 different times I've heard that monologue. Right. But I think with that mindset, they created the atmosphere by making it have that, because that's part of that survival mechanic. That like survival mentality.
Yeah. And yeah, I noticed some of the negative reviews about that very thing as well. And I, at this point, after having played the game with kind of a reviewer mentality, it's like, oh, no. This isn't Terminator the movie. This is Terminator the cutscenes from the future, where you see him, walking through these mass graveyards of skulls and dodging tanks, and no one engage anything that flies. Once you switch that mentality, it's much easier to understand what's kind of expected of you as the main character.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I went into this with like so low expectations between the developer history. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, you can't. You have to look at the track record. You have to look at the track record of the source material. The last decent Terminator game was literally the arcade cabinet that I was talking about, and that was based on the movie. Yep. And that was an on-the-rail shooter. Yep. So for me, like you, it is definitely one of those. I think they nailed the atmosphere and like that survivor. We have to survive mentality. And if you look at the game through that lens, it's a little bit different than, it's not a run and gun, or it's an RPG light, or any of the, whatever stuff you want to put in there. So I definitely do agree with that. If you had your biggest criticism, though, other than the source material, what would it be, though?
That's a great question.
Again, this is from what you've just played, not what you foresee or anything, just from your couple hours experience that you've played so far.
I don't think it's really fair for me to criticize the game beyond what we've said already. If there's one thing that I really don't like, it was the amount of language. It was excessive, and I'm no prude. You should hear the outtakes from Sudo Show. So I'm no stranger to swearing when you get frustrated, but it just seemed excessive, and it didn't really match the animation style. You have these really stiff, very animated characters that keep dropping the F-bomb in your maybe not the F-bomb, but they keep swearing over the comms. And it's just like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem necessary. It doesn't add anything. That's probably my biggest beef. But in reality, it's one of those games that's just a little bit outside of my niche of video games that I enjoy. So, I mean, just beyond that, there's not much I can really say they did wrong or poorly. Like you said, other than the source material.
Well, even the people who make the source material can't get that right. Even when they bring back the original guy. Original guy, original female, and original director and producer. There's a reason I do state that this game is better than all 4 of the last movies in every way. I know that seems like faint praise, but it's actually, I mean that in the most sincere form. Like, if they were going to do a new Terminator type movie, I would have preferred something like this, because it shows the parts that we've always seen kind of vaguely in the first 2 movies. Right. And anytime they've tried to do the future stuff, we get Terminator John Connor.
Yeah, I was very disappointed by the reboot, but that's
which one?
Exactly.
But no, I'm with you. I think I don't necessarily think the language is the problem. I think it's the frequency in which it's used. I think is when every and by no means am I like you a prude at all. Anybody who knows me, that some of the language just feels out of place. It's not so much that it's, I wouldn't necessarily not expect to hear the amount, but it's just where it's being laid out in kind of a structure of like over the comms and like a story kind of element. And it's just, it feels very forced, and like they're trying to force that R rated, M rating. And yeah, that's probably my biggest one. We didn't really get into the whole crafting thing because that's a 20-minute discussion about that. Short version, you go around collecting crap like you would in Fallout or Skyrim or any of Bethesda's games. And you go and craft stuff from it like a Bethesda game. Like it's very Bethesda RPG light is probably the best way to describe it. And difference is, at least this game isn't buggy as crap that takes modders to fix it. Just saying. It's almost like I've played every Bethesda game that there possibly is.
That's kind of what it feels like.
Yes, but with a more focus on story, which is something that has always been a weak spot in every Bethesda game other than probably Prey.
Actually, I haven't played Prey. It's kind of been on the bottom of my wish list for a while.
It's one of those games. I'll talk to you about that one after. This episode of Gamester is brought to you by Bitwarden. Get started right now with your free account at bitwarden.com/DLN. A password manager is software that allows you to have the peace of mind knowing that your online accounts are safe. How does it do that? Well, securing your online accounts is very important, because the best security practice for your passwords is to have different passwords for every account on every website that you go to. Sure, this makes sense as a policy, but without a password manager, that also makes things very, very painful to do. Bitwarden solves this by providing tools to store all your passwords in a secured vault, auto-generate those passwords for you, and even automatically fill in those passwords on login forms so you don't have to. You can access your data across many types of devices, like your web browser, using their mobile apps, desktop applications, or even the command line. Bitwarden seals your private data with end-to-end encryption before it ever leaves your devices, so you know that you're the only person with access to your data. Bitwarden is the password manager that I use and trust, because in addition to all these great features, it's also 100% open source software. That's right, 100% open source, which means the features and security of their infrastructure can be vetted and improved by the community. They don't just stop there. They also bring in third-party security firms to audit their code to make sure it is secure as possible. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started. And did I mention you can get started for free free while you can. But I think you'll want to check out their premium accounts anyway, because you get 1 gig of encrypted file storage, 2-step logins with YubiKey, 2-factor authentication and Duo, Vault Health reports, Bitwarden Authenticator, and priority customer service. And you get all this for just $10 a year. Make the smart move, like many, from the DLN community and go to bitwarden.com/DLN. This lets you get the peace of mind for your passwords and other sensitive data while also supporting a company that truly gets open source. Sign up for their $10 a year premium account to let them know you appreciate them for supporting open source and supporting the GameSphere podcast. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN and get started. Thanks again to Bitwarden for sponsoring GameSphere. We've had some good, had some bad, a lot of higher expectations that we had than, or coming out of it after we've played some of it than at least that one I initially went in. So if you had to give this on a 50 rating, out of 50 rating, where would you kind of structure that?
You know, they always tell you go with your gut instinct. And when you said 50, for some reason, 37 came to mind. It's pretty good. It's not a game that I'd likely stay up till 4 a.m. playing and then going, oh, I should probably get to sleep. It's not one of those, but it's got a lot of potential. And I only played through about the second map, but it's got some potential. It's got some moments that are really exciting, but it just kind of fell short a little bit here and there. But yeah, I don't know. 37 just came to mind.
So for those that don't understand like that rating scale, it's because it translates to whatever one you want it to go to. It's like running something through a compiler, insert language here, and there you go. You want it based on a five-star scale. It's a 3.7 star.
3.7. Exactly.
If you want it on a 100-point scale, it's your 74. If you want it on a, there you go. And so it aims to try to please everybody. But for me, it's the most, because there's really just 5 categories I base stuff on, and each one's 10 points. That's the logic.
Oh, there you go. That makes sense.
So for me, I'm about in the same category. I say about 35, so about a 7 out of 10 if you want the traditional gaming scale. Yeah. It does a lot of stuff right. It does a lot of the atmosphere stuff right. It's not a game that I'm like, oh, I want to go back and play. It's not one of those kind of games. Like I don't feel the need to go back and once I beat it, replay it kind of game. It's like one of those play it once and okay, cool. I like the experience. It was good. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time. And if a game can not make me feel like I'm wasting my time, then I'm off for that.
Right.
The one thing I will say is the price tag can be a little heavy for some people because movie license games are not cheap, not generically known for being the bargain basement stuff. This is not a bargain basement game in that regard. Mm-hmm. It pretty much sticks around that $39.99, $29.99 kind of structure.
But I will say that if you throw it on your Steam list and wait for it to go on sale and pick it up for a decent percentage off, it's if you like that Fallout style game and if you want to just be in the Terminator universe, then it's probably worth a playthrough. For myself, I'm probably going to keep it on my system. I'm fairly obsessive when it comes to finishing books and movies and games and stuff. So it's probably one. Well, your backlog is much longer than mine. But I mean, it's probably one that I'll keep on my system. And when the mood strikes me right, I'll probably play, a little bit here and there, but it's not going to be in that. It's not going to be in the it's not going to be a 48 out of 50. It's not going to be that game that I obsess about logging in, making sure that I spend the 10 minutes a day to get my daily experience pool, or like Elder Scrolls has daily writs and login rewards. Even if it's during my lunch hour, I will log in, collect those things on Elder Scrolls, and then just log back out. But it's something that I'm intrigued by the story, especially since I've only got about that 2.5 hour. That only spent about 2.5 hours with the game so far. So it's probably something that I'll go back and and see how it develops, just because I've kind of exited that tutorial hand-holding phase.
Mhm.
So now that I've got much more open control of the game, of the world, of how I progress, it'll definitely get some more of my attention in the coming weeks.
Yeah, definitely. This to me is one of those games where it's like, oh, I got an hour. Like I can sit down and play this for an hour. I don't know if I could do like you said, I don't know if I could do binge kind of like mentality with this game, like do it all in one sitting kind of deal.
Yeah.
This is one of those. I got an hour to kill. As far as I'll play some Terminator Resistance. So there's some good, there's some bad. Gave our final thoughts. So where can people find you, Eric?
Well, I'm not hard to find. I'm on just about every social media platform I think there is at IT Guy Eric. You can go out to my website at IT, or not at, you can go to my website, itguyeric.com, and you can find me and Brandon Johnson over at the Sudo Show, a member of the Destination Linux Network.
Which this show is also part of the Destination Linux Network. And it's always good having have co-hosts from other shows on. I enjoy talking to you guys, even though it's not as fun because you guys give the sarcasm back.
Yeah, we've all hung around each other enough on video streams just like this to know what to do.
For those that you can find me at MattDLN on Twitter. And other than that, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you again, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a blast and a fun challenge.
All right, talk to you guys later.